In the latest update and the last iteration of Treasure Hunt, we saw Daeron's weapon be added into the game. So we now have, alongside Daena and Senelle's weapon, the Infantry counterpart's weapon also added. He is available only through Treasure Hunt currently for 500 coins. To get that, if you're opening only SS chests, it averages out on my data to be about 4,500 black diamonds. So it is a very steep price, and given what's happened with Senelle and Sandor's weapons, where they were first added into Treasure Hunt, it is going to be a very long time, if ever, that he's going to be added into packs. So he is exceedingly high budget, and because of that, the question will be just how good is the weapon, how much better will it make Daeron, and what exactly can you expect if you buy into it. So I have all the information mapped out and mathed out here in a Google Sheet. So there's a lot to go over. At the top you have Daeron's general overview, his stats, and below that you have every single stage of his weapon. So the first jump to his 4-star ability from just unlocking his weapon to base here will reduce the triggers required from 50 normal attacks to 40 normal attacks. So effectively 20% improvement there. That has two routes to improvement, where one, you'll get more triggers off of the actual damaging effects just because less triggers are required, but you'll also get them off quicker and earlier throughout the fight. So there's some snowball elements there too, which also have value. And then in what is quite a unique progression, the jump from base weapon to 1-star and 2-star weapons are the worst points of upgrade throughout this whole progression. So each star there will increase the damage coefficient to all lineups by 5%, and then an additional 5% to all lineups that are inflicted by bleed. So it goes 55 and 155 to 60 and 160. Past that, to the 3rd and 4th star, it's 10% jumps, all the way up to 80% coefficient to all lineups, and 180% coefficient to all bleeded lineup. I have the maths exactly what this will look like across a whole fight down here. All this maths are done primarily with Rhea and John bleeds. You of course can't put an exact damage value to Daeron's awakening damage because of this second part where it does extra damage to bleeded targets, so there's a range in the damage that can deal, and also damage will go up if the target you're hitting has multiple lines. So if you're hitting, say, infantry into infantry in Ultimate Tournament, there's only 5 lineups there. But if you're attacking someone's castle and they have infantry, cavalry, spearmen, and bowmen, there's going to be 20 lineups there, with 5 for each unit type. So there's a huge range of damage that you will get from Daeron, and I've listed that entire range throughout. The exact maths of that is here on the left. You can check that if you want. I'm not going to go over explaining it because it feels fairly unnecessary. But something to note is that these numbers can go even higher if you add Sandor into the mix, because his 4-star ability does bleed, and it can also bleed the 2nd and 3rd rows if you have his weapon at base or 4 stars. So the maximum values here can be slightly higher. Throughout this, the left-hand side charts are with Sonara's base 4-star ability and the number of normal attacks you get from that. The normal attack values are mapped out from an infantry lineup against an infantry rebel group. And on the right-hand side, you have 4-star Sonara weapon, which will of course increase the total amount of normal attack triggers throughout. So depending on your progress with Sonara's weapon, it will be somewhere between these two values as damage coefficient averages. With the 4-star Sonara weapon, you look down here at this box here, the base 4-star awakening range between 1,750 to 12,250% damage coefficient. Realistically, it will never go as high as that, and it will definitely never go as low as the minimum. So it'll be somewhere in between, I'd say around 6 to 8k as an average value to put to that. If we go down, this set of charts is with his base weapon, so that's where the triggers go from 50 to 40. You see there you get 9 total Daeron procs with this, compared to 7. So that one weapon alone will give you 2 additional triggers on average of Daeron's 4-star ability, which is very significant in terms of damage. That will map out to about a 20% damage increase from Daeron, and mirror pretty much exactly what you would expect with the 20% reduction in triggers required. Then if you go down to the 4-star weapon, it spikes up to 3,600 to 22,500% damage coefficient as a range. So if we go back up, it's 12,250 there. So it increases the maximum by over 10,000. And when you map that out and do the averages of the ranges, it will be somewhere around a 90% damage increase going from the base Daeron 4-star to Daeron with his 4-star weapon equipped. That is exceedingly high as a damage increase. Again, it's over 10,000% as a maximum. Just as some context, something like Senelle, when I did all the maths on her weapon, that mapped out to being an increase of less than 2,000%. So if we're going to be as binary as that, with Daeron's weapon, he can bring a damage increase of over 5 times higher than Senelle's weapon as an equivalent for the female synergy. It's not that simple, but that is the numbers of it. And that does mean that Daeron's weapon is very, very high tier. The only thing holding it back realistically is how hard it is to obtain, but it is so good that I would expect there to be some meta shifting at the top end of the game because of this, which is annoying for me because the more people that run infantry, the more people that run cavalry to counter that, of course. We have seen recently quite a bit of shifting towards spears, and even with just the base weapon, I piloted for WTF against WXC in the AC match on Saturday at the time of recording, and General 43 was in Casterly, and they could not rally that account out whatsoever. And it's one of those near-maxed infantry accounts, and it did have base Daeron weapon, and it was never even close to being kicked on rally waves realistically. And something you have to consider with Daeron specifically is any improvements to Daeron, whilst him in himself is so high value, he has elements of synergy countering throughout. So of course you have his 40% anti-counter against cavalry for a start. His synergy counter will be female because of the disarms from Cersei especially, and female will default to cavalry at this level of play normally, but Daeron's effect can't actually be disarmed. So if you look here, A5 lineup, attacked, blah blah blah, enemy lost 0, attack missed, so that means it was disarmed and didn't do any damage. Despite it missing though, that normal attack still triggered Daeron's 4-star ability, so any improvements to Daeron's ability helps counter female because it helps retain your damage output through disarm effects, which, as you can see here, really just kill the damage output of bleed infantry. And this also applies to Sandor's 4-star ability as well. So there are routes into still getting out decent damage output at the real min-max levels of infantry through these 4-star abilities. And the final thing I wanted to go over was re-rolling this weapon, which isn't something I normally go into with these weapon reviews, but he is effectively the easiest infantry weapon to roll high base attacks on, because as it shows here, the max value that you can roll into is a 12, and that means the lowest value you can roll into is a 4 as well. But normally when you're re-rolling weapons, you can find yourself, hitting 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, and it's all useless to you. That's a lot less prominent with weapons with the highest base attack max values. And of course, he's also locked into infantry stats, so he's only 100 reforge or to roll. Normally, the weapons with the 12 max value base attacks are total attack weapons. For bleed specifically, you have Night King John and Sandor, all 3 of them total attack. So you have to lock them to infantry and then roll a 250 reforge ore each, whereas it's only 100 for Daeron's weapon. So the weapon itself will be very good to roll into. If you're a lower spending infantry player and you hit it in full from treasure hunt or something, that is very good for you, and it will be better than stuff like having Needle or Chris's weapon just on bleed commanders for their stats. And if he ever does get added into packs in future, I do think just getting the weapon to base could have value just because of how much better the re-rolling process will be. But yeah, all in all, this is one of the best weapons in the game. It's very hard to obtain, especially in multiple copies, but the damage increase is huge. A 90% damage increase to the 4-star skill is not normal. That is very, very high value. And I do think it will have some meta-altering ripple effects over the next few months, especially as we're going into UC in these next few weeks.